Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the breakneck 6-year journey of how computers exploded out of military basements and landed right on our home desktops. It's a wildly fascinating story of brilliant engineering, sheer luck, and a few frantic corporate decisions that absolutely transformed the way we live and work today.
Just think about that timeline for a second. We're going to unpack this rapid evolution and see exactly how computing went from a soldering iron hobby for hardcore engineers to an absolute daily necessity. This wasn't some slow, century-long creep, you guys. This was a literal technological explosion between 1975 and 1981.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We've got 1. Dawn of the hobbyist. 2. Apple II changes everything. 3. The first killer app. 4. IBM enters the market. And finally, 5. The modern PC legacy.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, Dawn of the Hobbyist, featuring the Altair 8800.
So let's rewind the clock to January 1975. Check out this original brochure for the Altair 8800, introduced by a company called MITS down in Albuquerque. While there were a few earlier machines, the Altair is widely considered the very first commercially successful, mass-produced personal computer. For about $400, you got a metal box kit powered by an Intel 8080 chip. But when I say kit, I mean a literal box of loose parts that you had to painstakingly build and solder together yourself. And let's be real, even then, it didn't always work on the first try. But okay, let's say you built it perfectly. If you wanted to actually use the thing, you had to endure this horrendously tedious process. You had to hand compile your code, look up the processor's command set, and then literally flip physical switches on the front panel just to enter binary data. Your reward? 8 blinking LED lights. And here's the real kicker. If you turned the power off, you lost your entire program. Gone. But despite all that, people were literally camping out in front of MIT's headquarters just to buy one. Which brings us to part 2. Apple II changes everything, moving from mechanic to user. Just 2 short years later, in April 1977, the computing world took a massive leap forward. Notice the crazy contrast here. We moved away from messy metal box kits that required a soldering iron to a pre-assembled consumer appliance. The Apple II actually looked like it belonged in a home. It had a built-in keyboard, and you could plug it directly into a TV to get real color graphics. This shift basically invented a whole new concept, the user. Suddenly, you didn't have to be a mechanic to drive the car. Under the hood, though, the Apple II offered some truly incredible hardware. It ran on a MOS 6502 processor, packed 8 internal expansion slots, and eventually supported Steve Wozniak's completely brilliant floppy disk drive controller. Wozniak actually called this controller his greatest technical achievement, and for good reason. It made reading and storing data so much simpler, cheaper, and vastly more reliable than anything else out there. And that specific piece of hardware laid the groundwork for something massive. Moving on to part 3, the first killer app, or software that sells hardware. So up until this point, computers were a really fun toy for enthusiasts, but they desperately needed a practical application to reach the mainstream. Software became the connective tissue that finally gave regular folks a reason to drop cash on this expensive hardware. Enter VisiCalc in 1979. Created by Dan Bricklem out of MIT, VisiCalc was the world's very first electronic spreadsheet. Before this, if you wanted data processed, you had to beg the high priests of corporate IT and wait months for them to run it on a giant mainframe. VisiCalc totally shattered that monopoly. It let departments like marketing build databases and run numbers right at their own desks. As this quote perfectly sums up, VisiCalc was the final piece of the puzzle that transforms the little personal computer from a toy to a legitimate business machine. No one really knew they needed an electronic spreadsheet until it existed. And then, bam, every business had to have one. Because it was initially only available on the Apple II, it propelled Apple into a household name, fueled their explosive IPO, and basically kickstarted the commercial software industry as we know it today. That takes us to part 4, IBM enters the market. Big Blue goes personal. Seeing Apple's chaotic, explosive growth, the ultimate corporate giant IBM realized they were missing the boat and needed to catch up fast. Down in Boca Raton, lab director William Lowe pitched a consumer PC idea to CEO Frank Cary. Cary turned around and gave Don Estridge's team a seemingly impossible deadline: develop a working prototype in 1 month and bring the final product to market in exactly 1 year. For a massive, slow-moving corporation like IBM, a timeline like that was basically unheard of.
To actually hit that brutal deadline, IBM had to make a radical shift. They completely abandoned their decades-long history of designing and controlling every single proprietary component in-house. Instead, they went with an open architecture, used off-the-shelf parts, and grabbed a microprocessor from Intel. They even repurposed the display and keyboard designs from an older IBM system. It was a totally new playbook for Big Blue. And finally, Part 5, the modern PC legacy and the open standard.
This wild strategic pivot culminated in August 1981. Unveiled at the Waldorf Hotel in New York, the IBM PC was a roaring success. Priced at just over $1,500, it was selling at a staggering rate of 1 per minute at its peak. But the true genius here was that open architecture. It created a massive playground for third-party developers, spinning up over 750 software packages in the first year alone. Hardware manufacturers started building expansion cards, and competitors literally reverse-engineered IBM's boot code to build their own, cheaper, IBM-compatible clone computers.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about this question for a second. That one rushed, purely pragmatic decision by IBM to use open, off-the-shelf parts just to hit a deadline, it accidentally created a universal standard. It formed the very DNA of the desktop computers you and I rely on every single day. From flipping switches on a metal box to an indispensable global tool in just 6 years. It kind of makes you wonder, what seemingly small tech decision being made right now will completely dictate our lives 40 years in the future?